Hello and welcome to a very special emergency edition of the NetDems Podcast. I'm Francis and I'm with Naz today. And joining us is Dr. William Yu of the PPCRV, longtime friend of NetDems. And it's a small world. Um, well, those of you who may know us from our professional affiliations, hello. We're here to talk about what just happened in the elections because it's something that affects all of us, and it's something that's kind of interesting also from an IT perspective. And so we're here to talk about what happened, not just from our perspective as people who've been advocates for ICT in the country, but also from as ICT practitioners ourselves. So welcome, William, Dr.
Hello,
Yu.
and thanks for having me on the show. Nice seeing you ulit, Kiko, Nas.
Yes. Uh, so let's go dive into it, and let's not waste anyone else's time. So, what did you think about this year's elections?
Well, for us at the PPCRV, it's too soon to call, right? We're still doing the unofficial parallel count where we do a third-party verification of physical and transmitted ER. So that's still ongoing at the moment. We do have a substantial a number of ERs already in our command center, graciously hosted by PLDT in Sampaloc. But of course, the work just got started there yesterday. Now, there's also the random manual audit, which also started yesterday, which actually just it kicked off. This one naman is in C. Dinesman and Manila Bay. So it's an ongoing process as well. Well, also for those of you who didn't follow, the first election verification, the election digital verification was done by ComOmelec yesterday, actually. Third parties were there, including myself and Lente, to observe the digital verification of the first online voting for all overseas fit Filipinos. So that also happened
Mhm.
yesterday. So it was quite an eventful day yesterday, in addition to, of course, a very eventful Monday. But again, too soon to tell. But the audit so far point to a good election. There were reports, though, on the field about breakdowns of machines and the
Mhm.
like, including a lot of allegations about unintentional voting. We also received a number of calls because we do run a call center
Mhm.
during election day, and there were quite a bit of calls about unintentional voting where they didn't want to vote for a particular candidate, but it came out. So those came out as well. But with all things and all reports, we verify. So we get the details such as who experienced the issue, what clustered precincts, and we do ask our network of coordinators and volunteers to verify it. So again, the information is still being processed right now, but I mean, there's no lead that we will not pursue, at least in this case. But again, um, outside of those things, the occasional machine failure, and the unintentional voting, it was relatively peaceful. There were some concerns, though, in Basilan, Barangay Basilan, and Dato Odin's in Suwat, were the two areas where there were violence, but voting was eventually completed the next day. So that's that, like the quick Cliff Notes version run through, at least in the IT
Right.
perspective. Yeah.
Right. So, were there any things that, in particular, that you noticed from the overseas vote yesterday? Let's start with that.
Okay. So this is the first time we are actually doing online voting. And as you guys probably know as well, with online voting, there are no ballots, right? There are no
Mhm.
physical ballots. You don't, I mean, for the 7 posts that use online voting, you actually visit a website, you do an online verification, the like. Now, there were a bunch of challenges. Of course, it was a whole month long worth of voting and longer than that for registration. We observed reports about challenges with respect to biometric registration. That was one of the bigger challenges.
Mhm.
getting overseas Filipinos to do the biometric registration, which they have to do before they can actually vote. So the whole take a selfie with the ID was a bit challenging, and there were challenges as well with respect to, for example, glare and the like, which make that quite difficult. Now we don't have the numbers yet, but ComOm like does have some and will eventually publish that. But we do feel that the turnout could have been better if those, logistic concerns were addressed. We also feel though that this is also part and parcel of the system being new. It is the first time we are doing online voting after all. So
Mhm.
things like, for example, ballot verifier, right? That became an
Right.
issue because
Right.
people were assuming that the piece of JSON code that you see on the
Mhm.
screen would actually show who you voted for. But of course, they weren't aware of the format of that particular piece of JSON. So they actually thought that the vote went to somebody else. So there are things like that, which is just a function of really the system being new and a really lack of awareness, and of course lack of promotion as well, because it is the first time we're doing it. Now I do hope that we don't get disillusioned by the challenges we face with online voting, because I really feel for at least the overseas Filipino, this is much better
Mhm.
rather than having to go to your embassy, consulate, or MECO, for example, just to vote, especially if you're in places like South America or the United States. I mean, going to a consulate or an embassy is not, it's not easy to do. And for example, seafarers, right? So
Mhm.
I feel that we should pursue the technology, try to work out the kinks and move forward. The second major observation is that we also feel that people aren't quite familiar with the audit process for an online vote auditing system. There are, for example, proofs of shuffling, proofs of decryption, proofs of encryption, and there's a digital ballot box and trustee system, which aren't familiar to a lot of people. Although those people who are familiar with online voting, this is the global, golden standard actually for that. So there are quite a bit of technology involved to ensure that the elections are clean and honest in that particular case. Right, so
Yeah.
that's like the quick view of the overseas voting, but the turnout was lower than expected.
Would you know which countries in the world also use online voting?
Yes, there is a list. So it's 77 posts. So majority of posts were online voting. All of the US, for example, all of Europe except Russia. The ones that did not do online voting, they have something called mixed voting. So some of them have the fast track system by Meru on DRE mode, so like kiosk mode. Some of them have the fast track system in OMR mode, so there's still a ballot that you insert. And some of them apparently still have mail in voting. So there were a few posts. I don't have the exact number with me right now, but majority, 77 posts, are subject to online voting. So again, most of Southeast Asia outside of China and most of Europe and the Americas are subject to online voting.
Okay. Do you see online voting as something that can get adopted for everyone, not just OFWs, or is that something that should be reserved as a special case for OFWs because
Well,
of
I have two views
how
there.
unfamiliar it
Oh,
is?
go ahead. Yeah, so I
Yeah,
have two
because
views there.
mhm.
Sorry. So my
Go ahead.
first view is, as a technologist, I feel we should be using online voting. One, it's cheaper. Two, it's more accessible, more convenient. And me as a technologist, there are actually ways and means to audit the system digitally, right? But as a PPCRV trustee, there's also this question of trust, right? If the system is not that explainable, some people will find it hard to trust. So we still feel, and I believe so as well, that maybe we may not be able to use it yet for the mainstream national and local elections, but definitely for overseas Filipinos makes sense. Also, we have a legal well, apparently there may be a legal impediment to using it for the local elections, because that is covered under RA 9369, while the overseas voting is covered by another enabling law that's a lot more flexible. So I think that's one of the barriers to adopting it broadly. Now, if you were to ask me where else can we use online voting, I think we should apply it, for example, to LAV, the local absentee voting, for example. So these are cases where it makes sense, right? This is a controlled population. You could educate them well. You can do like road shows for the biometric registration, so they don't have biometric registration problems later on. So I think we should adopt the technology. We should perfect it, not right away for the mainstream national and local elections, but I think we should continue to use it and, of course, expand its use.
So would you say that, so it's a maturity issue for the general populace? Would you say that we are two presidential election cycles away from it, or longer?
I can't say, but I mean, definitely it's possible two presidential elections away. I mean, I'm not going to discount that possibility, but definitely not the next one, right?
All right. Okay. So, moving on. Because we've had the last three presidential elections with Smartmatic.
Mhm,
Yeah, and then now we've had the first one with Miru.
mhm.
What are your thoughts on the differences between them, and which ones are we seeing an improvement this time around?
Well, of course, the folks at Meru have the benefit of experience from previous elections. They may not have ran it themselves, but definitely a lot of the requirements and a lot of the mechanisms, processes is in place, and all auditability measures have been inherited from past elections. So there's a lot of inherited experience, so to speak. So definitely the experience in 2025 is much better than 2010, when the last vendor was new, right? So it was a lot more painful in 2010 to onboard the system than in 2025, which is a positive thing, because then there are more players now in the market rather than just one vendor for the longest time. The the challenge though is Miro also lacks experience. So in one case, they have the experience of learning from previous elections, but they also lack experience in running it themselves. So some issues that have appeared in the current election may seem minor, but we're already, we've encountered them in past elections. There was a resolution to them in the past, but because this is the first time Meru is running it, they weren't that prepared for it. Now, fortunately for us, many of these things aren't as, I mean, of course, they definitely did not affect the results, but they did cause a bit of challenge. Like, for example, the concern about the duplicate records on the first night of the election was an example of that. So there are some scenarios that could have been that if you had that experience before, you wouldn't have written the software in that way, for example. So that's just one example. So I feel good because now that they ran it, I'm pretty sure when they bid the next time around, they'll have, solid experience on both ends. Then if Smartmatic does decide to bid as well and they get through their legal problems, then they will, at least there will be some healthy competition, which I think is good overall for us. Of course, at the end of the day, I still feel that, it would have been nicer if a Filipino company could participate, but yeah, it's not meant to be, at least not yet. Okay.
Yeah. Um.
You mentioned the duplicate returns. Can
Mhm.
you explain it further? Kasi medyo umiikot siya sa public and it's causing a bit of
Yeah.
controversy.
Correct. So The transparency server is where the media and observers such as PPCRV and the dominant majority and dominant minority parties, we have individual transparency servers. Now, the transparency server has a piece of software that is similar to the canvassing and consolidation system, or the CCS is what they call it. So it has a similar piece of software. Therefore, it will get election returns directly from the ACM. So each of us have a server. So PPCRV has a server. We get the election returns. Now the election returns are packaged, right? They're encrypted. They're digitally signed. They're in Oasis EML format. It's not in a form that we can take and push into a dashboard, right? So that's one. Two is COMELEC cannot do a tally themselves. So they're not allowed by law to make a tally. So if you notice, the official COMELEC website also has the results, but they can only show per ER, because
Right.
every time they show something, it becomes official. So they can't do that unless they do the canvas process, which is the ladderized process. So municipal, provincial, national. So that being said, a transparency server receives the ERs, or the election returns. Now, when we get the election returns and we want to put it into our tally boards for the unofficial counts and dashboards and search and query tools, it has to be converted into what the chairman calls machine readable form. So in this case, it's a CSV. It's a giant CSV file. The giant CSV file is generated in batch, right? Every 15
Mhm.
minutes in this particular case. The way this system was designed was there's a process that takes the ERs, checks it, decrypts it, converts it into rows, and inserts it into the file. Then it does that for every ER. Then there's another process that will eventually pick up, once this process is done, pick up all the rows and generate what we call the results file. Now, as what happened in this election, hindi pa tapos yung pag-pick ng ER at nagsusulat sa file. So this guy has not distributed the file yet. 15 minutes have passed. Another process was spawned to write to that file. Right? So, hindi pa tapos yung isang writer, hindi pa nahugot, meron ng bagong pumasok. Kaya there were duplicates. And if you notice, they moved the spacing. Right? So if you notice, after 2 p.m., or at least at the 2 p.m. mark, instead of every 15 minutes, they spaced it out a bit para hindi mag-abot yung pag-ride sa yung pick up. Now, it's not the best public explanation, but it is the technical explanation of what
Yeah.
happened. So it's a scheduled job. It's done every 15 minutes. Hindi pa tapos yung job. So the next job started without the first job being finished. Kaya nagpatong-patong siya.
Was
Now
it
it's it's not something naman that it is something we can verify, right? So we can
right?
go through all the dump files that they sent us pre 2 a.m. and we can do a filter to see if there are duplicate precincts, right? The
Right.
duplicate precincts, and we can see if these were really duplicate, and we look at the tally and if they are correct. Then of course, on the new files, we will see that those duplicate precincts are gone. So it's something that we can verify. So every media entity and the observers can verify this. Second is, in PPCRV, since we're doing the unofficial parallel count, where we're manually comparing the election returns and the transmitted returns, this is also another audit on our part, right? So it's more reason for us to complete this audit to make sure that something wasn't changed along the way, that it wasn't just duplicate, right? So that is something that gives us a little more confidence in this case, because we are in a position to check, and of course the rest of the entities that are recipients of the data can also do their own verification.
Right. I understand that the official really pronouncement you can only make based on ERs at the certificate of canvassers level. So it took a
Canvas,
while
yeah.
for this. Yeah, took a while for the COCs to come out, because I understand that COCs only come out when uh, under their jurisdiction you only get 100% reporting in.
Hindi naman 100%, right? There are rules. So there's a general instruction for
Mm.
general instructions for canvassing. It's actually in the Comelec website. Now, of course, ideally you wait for 100%, and it has to be ladderized, meaning the first
Right,
stage is always the municipal stage. So
right,
province is waiting until all the municipalities is complete.
right, exactly.
Municipalities are waiting until all the
Mhm.
ERs or clustered precincts have come in. But there are scenarios where you can say, nothing more is coming or it doesn't change results anymore, and you can throw it up. So it's not hard and fast rule, no 100%, but this is not a decision that they can take lightly, din, right? So
Mm.
it's not naman super 100% all the time, but it's something that causes, to your point, it will cause the delay in getting the results. And that's the reason why the official results will take a while. Kasi hihintayin ng ER ni munisipyo, hihintayin yung lahat ng munisipyo si probinsya, then probinsya will bring it to the National Board of Canvassers. But if you notice, in the first night, lahat ng mayor, vice mayor are proclaimed because they're proclaimed at the municipal level. So each board of canvassers can confirm or proclaim at their levels. But of course, for national positions like senator and party list, they have to wait till the end.
Right. So the thing is, I was looking for the at the certificates of canvas early on, and it took a bit longer this time for the COCs to come out.
Uh, there
But
is this there is this desire by particularly the current management of Comelec right now to get a perfect election kasi. So they want to get all the results, and they want it not just all, but they want it electronically transmitted. So the contingency procedure, for example, for the clustered precincts, for transmitting of the election returns, is in the past kasi you will try to transmit, right? If it
right,
fails, you take the memory card, you put it in an
right,
envelope, and you bring it manually to the municipal board of canvassers, where you insert it into the CCS there in its canvas. In the old way, we will never see that in the transparency server kasi it went directly to the canvassing. But itong current OMELEC is when you do not remove the memory card, you take the whole machine to the municipal board of canvasser location, then may backup network connectivity then. So they force every machine to transmit. So that's a different but the nice thing about that is that
mm,
we as the recipients in the transparency servers will get those. While
hmm,
in the past, di ba, it went straight to the
that
municipal
went
board of
straight.
canvassers.
Yeah.
Hindi na siya dadaan sa amin.
Okay. And then let's talk about um, tawag to. Let's talk about um the way that the returns were transmitted this time. So it's gets sent in batches, and then every 15 minutes.
Hindi siya batches. Okay, so the returns are sent when they are transmitted. So si clustered precinct, si ACM, when you say transmit, they go straight to the respective CCS servers, so Municipal Board of Canvassers, Central Server, and the 5 transparency servers. Now, the batch portion is when the transparency servers get the electronic returns, which the server already has, and converts it into the format that we can process. That's the part that's batch. But the returns themselves aren't batch.
May middleware ba yung yung Comelec before sending the transmissions to PPCRV and NAMFREL?
To the transparency servers ni PPCRV
Mm.
and Ranfa. So in this case, no, right? So the ACM, of course, outside of the network equipment, just goes straight to the transparency servers. So there is a possibility na merong si munisipyo may get it, central get it, but PPCRV does not, or NAMFREL does not, or si dominant minority, majority, or media does not. So there is a small probability of that happening. So there will be, like in this election, merong mga precincts that we got that NAMFREL did not get because they are now individual transmissions. In the past, kasi they were using a transmission router, right? So the transmission router would retry on behalf. So if for example the municipal board of canvassers was not available kasi hindi pa nag-set up, for example, the transmission router will be the one to reset it. So meron siyang mechanism to retry. But this election, none. So if the EB presses send and that recipient was not there, it would not get received.
Mhm. I heard
But
reports of. Mhm.
just a note lang though na because connectivity is a lot better now, the differences weren't that big. So,
Mhm.
like for example, in many of the areas, the mobile data connectivity from one or more of the three providers is sufficient na for majority of the country. Then for those that are really, out of reach or very far away, may satellite connectivity naman, which is a lot more units actually
Mhm.
than the past. So in the past, there was the use of the Inmarsat Gigants, but there were only like a few thousand. Ito, I believe they got 10,000 new units. So there's a lot more satellite connectivity as well.
I heard that may instances sa Mindanao na may hindi raw pinapasok na PPCRV observers or volunteers. Can
Yes,
you tell us
that
more about that?
yeah. So that historically has been a challenge in some polling places, right? And there are many reasons for that. Sometimes we're just not recognized by the either DESO or election officer there. In some cases, there is this it's not safe, for example, and things like that. In some cases, kami na mismo yung magpo-pull out. Like in that particular case in Basasilan, it was a safety issue, so we pulled out
Mhm.
our volunteers there. So there are various reasons, and it still exists, but it's not as bad. I think our bigger challenge in Mindanao is we don't have that many volunteers there. So our volunteers tend to be roving rather than, say, if you see here in Metro Manila, when you enter a polling place, you see the blue and white shirts everywhere,
Mhm.
right? But in Mindanao, that's not necessarily the case. So we do have lesser volunteers there. So there may be situations where our volunteers have to rove, right? They can't, we don't have enough in the area.
Mhm. I saw some footage nga sent through private messengers, supposedly from Datu Odin sa Mindanao,
Sinsuat.
wherein may violence. And then may mga soldiers doon na parang dinidisperse na yung crowd or something like that.
Yeah, so there was so in that audience in Suwat, the one is the machines came late, right? In
Mhm.
the first place. The original EBs were fearful of their lives, so they had to back out as well. But of course we needed to have an election because we cannot disenfranchise them naman. So the AFP stepped in. So I believe the Philippine Army stepped in. The machines came at around, I think, 1 p.m. on election day, but they were delivered, but they were not deployed right away. They were pulled out first, then they were subsequently deployed. Now, of course, I don't have the official reason on why that happened, but eventually the elections pushed through. But I believe they extended it in certain
Mhm.
areas because there's more than one naman clustered
Mhm.
precinct there in that audience as well. So it was a concerning situation for sure. And I mean, I wouldn't blame our volunteers for being fearful of their lives,
Mhm.
but in this particular case, it did proceed. And I believe we got the electronic returns from there as well.
Okay. We'll take to a moment to introduce Attorney Dana Batnag. She's joining us now, and she's from
Hello,
the office. Great.
she's in
Hello.
the office.
You
Hi, Dana.
May question ako. Um,
Sure.
para kasing this election, well, una, walang question about, bakit ang bilis-bilis ng transmittal na natulog lang kami, ilang milyon na yung ano,
Although
right? So,
mabilis talaga ngayon, ha? As in, really, it's
pero walang
way
doubt,
fast. Mm,
'di ba?
way fast.
Parang, ay, wala akong nakikitang ganun karaming questions about the credibility of the election, or am I not seeing it but you're getting reports?
Uh, the reports we have are still mostly the pre-election concerns about the unintentional voting and machine failures. Uh, we're not getting too many after the election concerns yet. But as we all know, that doesn't really come out right away, right? That comes out a bit later. So we will wait and see, because even the speed of transmission problem came out months later. As a matter of fact, it only came out because the logs came out, diba?
Hmm.
So we shall see. I mean, how people think about it, but definitely technology did its job here, right? The transmission speeds were a lot faster. Although, as I did mention a while ago, they did add more contingency satellite connectivity for this particular elections. Now, whether people will complain about it, let's see. I mean, I can't discount it yet kasi parang in this particular, like within the first week of elections in 2022, wala namang nagreklamo tungkol
Hmm.
sa pagkabilis, right? It came months later.
I
Para
did
kasing
see.
ganito.
Go ahead.
Well, how do you see the elections 3 years from now? Will it be more digitized? Uh, may changes kaya? Kasi yun nga,
Ah,
sabi mo, mas marami ng
mm.
satellite links, mas marami ng connectivity ngayon. Based on what you've seen through the years and this election, what do you think the next elections will be like?
Well, for one, I think it's hard to beat our particular track record with running an OMR, right? A paper-based mark reader elections. Kasi the bar is so high na, transmission rate is high, voter turnout was high. It's above 80%, which is really high for a midterm kasi usually midterm, di naman ganun kataas. What I see though is that there will be a lot of improvements on the online voting for sure. Yun yung talagang still has to be worked out. The turnout rate was low. Some concerns, with substantial concerns about the biometric registration. So point of improvement, yun. Now, what gives me more hope is that at least meron ng kalaban, right? There are now alternative providers. So we're not dependent lang on one, because our election is pretty big, right? I mean, it's nationwide, it's synchronous, it's 18,000 positions, 60 million voters. It's not small, diba? It's all done in one day. So medyo it's a bit of a logistics feat, and getting a provider with a track record to do it is actually quite hard, 'di ba? Kasi most elections naman of big countries in the world like the United States or India for that matter, they don't run it on one day. Right? They may be
Hmm.
bigger, but it's not one day, and it's not even one election. Sa atin, we like to chunk in all the positions in one election: local, provincial, national, di ba? Isang election lahat. We were even going to put BARB in this one, di ba? Which was delayed. It will also be the chairman did mention that they will also use the same system. As a matter of fact, we know the system is configured for the BARM elections because the tally lines and the interfaces show the BARM positions, but there were no voters, for example, because it did not, I mean, we didn't use the BARM ballots. But we do know that they were definitely ready for that election as well. So yun,
I
siguro sa online voting, that lots of space to improve, yeah, for sure.
I seem to have heard or read somewhere na parang may minimum capitalization na required sa proposed um
Yeah,
voting
bidder.
counting machine
Yeah,
providers, and it's
correct,
a
correct.
barrier for Filipino companies to create their own and propose to the government.
That is one barrier, but there are plenty big Filipino companies. I think the biggest
Hmm.
barrier is the track record barrier, right?
Yeah, track
Where
record.
do you find another country that has one day election, mark reader, 60 million voters, 18,000 positions in the entire world?
Hmm.
It's not, right? So it's very hard to find a
How many
similar.
voters again yung minimum dapat na track record?
I think 69 million voters tayo this time around, registered.
So that's not even the living population of many first world countries.
Yep.
69 million.
And the turnout is 80%. So people actually
Mm-hmm.
vote here, 'di ba?
Mm-hmm.
Yung 20% na yan, siguro yun yung mga minor, 'di ba?
Mm-hmm. So I saw an issue raised by Computer Professionals Union na dun sa Comelec subsite where they showed the returns down to the
Mhm.
precinct level. Nagkaroon ng instances early on na yung the field na number of voters who actually voted was lower than sorry, the number of voters who actually voted was higher than the number of registered voters. Tapos later on, pinalitan ng COMELEC, kinorek to reflect na maging equal sila.
Yeah.
So, do you have any thoughts or ideas on that? So,
Yeah, so we raised that on the first day actually. So
mhm,
so it was reported us on the first day. We escalated it to Comelec, and they looked at the problem. Now that particular field was originally meant. Let's just say it's probably a wrong label, but the original value, the bigger value, includes what we call stamped ballots, rejected ballots, and return ballots. So it's not just ballots cast. So ballots cast are the proper, it went in and it was counted. But there are return ballots, and there are rejected or spoiled
mhm,
ballots. So when they say ballots cast, they were all cast, right? But they were not all
mhm,
counted. But the problem is the
mhm.
label was, it's not exactly
Not
the
properly
best.
descriptive.
Yeah, descriptive.
Mhm,
So what they did, instead of changing the label, which you can't do because it's source code, yeah. So they just changed
mhm,
the what it contained.
mhm. Do you see that as an issue because some people are raising it as a possible reason to invalidate the elections?
Well, it shouldn't, because we have other records, but this is not the
Mhm,
only. I mean, the Comlec website is one, but the transparency servers also have a record. The ERs are also there. The printed 32 copies are also floating around. So there's a lot of places where you can actually check. So it's
mhm,
not
mhm,
ano naman, it's not like the only place that is. And as a
mhm,
matter of fact, the website is not even the one used for proclamation. That's actually their
mhm,
backup. The one that they're
mhm,
used for proclamation is the one that goes through the ladderized, right? Which
mhm,
is a totally like separate route. So when they say central, the central server site, that's actually a backup. So it gets every ER like the transparency servers.
mhm. Um, have, you would probably know more about this. Sorry. Um, there's the issue of the version 3.4 and version 3.5 hash na umiikot.
Mm-mm.
Can you explain this for the viewers?
Yeah, so I was physically there. So I actually
Okay.
know. So we source code review the version of 3.36, 3.4, and 3.5. Like any piece of software, when you make a change, the hash changes, right? And of course, in the issue in this particular election, this is no different. There's a piece of software. There was an original build, right, which was subject to local source code review and subject to ICE review as well. So we reviewed that. As the election progresses, of course, there will be some changes, right? Sometimes new reports, etc. Sometimes bug fixes. Then that we require will have a new version and also have a new trusted build. So originally, the 3.4 was subject to trusted build. In this particular election, I think the ACM did three trusted builds, right? The original build, then the one that we thought would be the final version, but you know we Comlec found an issue that needed to be fixed, so they got the vendor to fix it, and they released a new fix. Now, if you
Mhm,
look at the local source code review manifest site in the Comelec website, you will see every trusted build there, because we
okay.
I, and to be honest, we're the ones who required that. Kasi there are some who feel na, why put the old versions? Why not just put the latest para hindi siya confusing? But for us kasi, the ones, especially the source code reviewers, we required to see all the versions that they actually had.
Mhm,
They claimed that they did a trusted build. And all of those trusted builds, nasa Facebook yung live stream. So if we say
mhm,
3.4 version, we can go to Facebook, look at the 3.4 live stream and see them actually build it. Then may
Mhm.
hashes dyan, which we in the source code review, which we did this exercise, we took the hashes from the trusted build, we looked at the source code, and we compared the hashes. Now,
Mhm.
one improvement in this particular election cycle is they also gave a manifest. If you notice the website, may manifest na hash ng lahat ng file.
Mhm.
So we could do spot checks of individual, important files, like the file that does the scanning, the file that does the tally, ganyan. Then we can check individually if the hashes match. So that
Mhm.
activity we actually did as part of the closing activities of the local source code review. Now, what they could have improved on though is that they could have released a final certificate na. Ito na yung final trusted build, the final, right? And these are the versions we're using. Para people don't have to look at that manifest page and kind of say, is there a newer version? Right?
Mhm.
So maybe that could be an improvement para to avoid the confusion. Kasi not everybody knows that there are multiple builds. As a matter of fact, some people think that the software came fully formed. Right? Then when you buy it from a store, you use it right away. But
Mhm.
our elections require a substantial degree of customization. So obviously there will be new builds as well. So that came out. It's not the easiest to explain, but it is what it is. So for those in the know, so if you know, you know. It's one of those cases where you do know naman that software can have bugs. And in the
Mhm.
issue of transparency, we need to see the change. So we need to
Mhm.
see what they changed, and we need to see the new trusted build.
Mhm.
Then there is also a document in the COMELEC website. There's a resolution there on election day checklist. There's an election day checklist where the EBs are required to check the hash code of the A ACMs. And that resolution actually has the final version number, and the final hash code built for that version number.
May nakita ako na parang the available document for a long time, nakalagay na version was 3.4 dun sa
Mm.
PDF. So, maangal yung mga tao na parang bakit yun nandun sa machines mismo is 3.5.
Yeah, kasi
So,
hindi
I guess,
nahuli yung bug. Hindi nahuli yung bug kasi later
mhm.
nahuli yung bug eh. During the many testing activities, there's a testing activity called pre-lat, right? Where all the machines, final version lahat, final version ng hardware, final version ng software
Mhm.
is subject to a test. During the pre-lat, they found something they needed to fix, and that's the reason why nagkaroon ng 3.5.
Mhm. So, I guess
So it's
this was,
ano lang, then yung ano lang is that of course people don't go to the Comelec site naman every day to check kung may latest,
mhm.
right? So 3.4 definitely was the version there for the longest time because that one was what we thought would already be the final version. If there was no
Mhm.
bugs found, that would have been the version used for the election.
Mhm. So, I guess this was a issue with Comelec's communications with the public then. They should do a better job of communicating.
Yeah, I think there are ways to avoid it. Like, you always have like a certificate, di ba? Na ito
Mhm.
na yung final. You put the manifest pa rin with all the build hashes, but you have a certificate on top, for ease of finding ano ba talaga yung hash code na at ngayon. But for us kasi tech people, especially the election observers, we can always go back to the stream videos and look at the hashes there. So for
Mhm.
us, it isn't a very big issue. But again, for public communications, you can't tell the public to say, please go to the stream and look for the hash there. Look at the
Mhm.
latest stream for the latest trusted build. Malay ba nila what that is, di ba? So it's a little harder, and it could have been simplified if there were like a final build certificate na ito na yung final version.
Mhm.
Then they modify that, di ba? May final build certificate as of date. Tapos when there's something new, mag-reissue sila. Diba? But they keep the manifest para the rest of us who do the reviews actually know that there were different versions.
Mhm. Attorney Dana, you have
Oh yeah,
comments,
because I was
questions?
wondering, kasi William, you were saying na those of us who know how to do this, you can just go to the Facebook page and review, right? So
Mm-mm.
the public don't know that, but there are
Don't know
tech
that.
professionals who were saying, hey, there was possible cheating. Shouldn't they have known better?
Well, I can't speak for all tech professionals in the country. You know, we come in all shapes and sizes now, oh man, diba?
Okay.
But at the end of the day, it's sometimes because you know what, it's in the website, it's streamed, but do people really know it was streamed, right? Parang it's not also something that makes the mainstream news. I mean, the media doesn't say, "Oh, by the way, there's this exciting final trusted build. Let's watch it in TV." Hindi naman siya. It's not one of those activities that people actually watch, right? And it doesn't get as much promotional attention. So it's also possible that these tech professionals aren't aware that it was actually streamed, right? In fact, I think they weren't even aware that there were different versions, that there were many builds. It wasn't just one build. And worse, I think some people believe that there should only be one build. Diba? That you buy
Mm.
it off the shelf and it works like my tablet. But even there, your tablet may software update eh, diba?
Yeah.
So parang any modern system is actually, its strength is its ano naman eh, its ability to adjust. But that one has to be controlled. Kaya may final trusted build tayo to make sure that the version that's running is the version that we reviewed. So
Mhm.
that I think is one factor. The second factor is of course we come in different shapes and sizes. Hindi naman lahat ng IT people software developer. May IT person naman na tech support. May IT person naman na hardware. May IT person naman na IT auditor. So iba yung background. And even the developers, kung front-end developer ka and you don't really work on high security software, we don't do trusted builds kung low security. This is something special for systems like these where there is a need to ensure the kumbaga chain of trust is maintained. So it's not even common IT knowledge actually. Then worst off, not everybody knows how a one-way cryptographic hash works. And they are
Mhm.
IT professionals as well. So again, different shapes and sizes.
So parang just because somebody says, I'm an IT professional, we shouldn't take him seriously na kaagad. Parang, excuse me, IT ka nga, pero do you have the expertise to
You do
actually make
election
the
software.
proper
Do you even do
analysis?
software? Actually, first step, software ba, di ba? So and ito lang yan, ang election system is also complex. It requires multiple expertise, di ba? May software yan, may hardware yan, may database din yan. So different comment like if you want to comment on transmission, for example, yung software developer can't really comment on transmission as
Mhm.
much as say a network engineer. So meron din even within the system, iba-iba rin yung specialization. I think IT has expanded and specialized so much na hindi na siya pwede one size fit its all eh. 'Di ba?
Kumbaga, as an IT person, tatanungin ako, can you fix my printer? No.
Oh, I get that a lot. Fix my cell phone. Oh my God. Sabi ko, no.
So
But
pero in
actually, I can.
general,
Just don't like. Na ganun.
you said before, it will take months before you can really pass a judgment on the past election.
Hindi
But
naman
from,
months yung judgment. I
hindi,
think
audit kasi.
to clarify, people will complain when they need to complain, right? When they have an issue. So sometimes it'll take a while before they form up what issue to ask about. I mean the whole transmission too fast came out later and lasted for a very long time despite all the explanations. So I think ano naman yan, that's one thing. But for us naman, we can pass judgment once we're done with our UPC. So that normally takes about at best 3 weeks, right? So once we have a view on a solid number of election returns and a solid number of electronic returns, and the RMAT has already moved through a solid number of ballot boxes, then we will get a better sense. But on the overall, if we compare it against past elections, yes, it went pretty well.
Mhm.
How would you compare the complaints ng mga past elections sa sa election na ito?
I cannot comment on the complaints ni Comelec because I'm sure they get a lot and way more than ours. But in terms of ours, there was less now, for sure. But that's also a function of feeling ko the hardware is newer. So I guess remember the last election was the hardware used was already on its third election for many of it. I mean, there were a few units that were new, but majority of the units were already used 3 times. So that's like a at least 6-7 years span, right?
Do you have any views dun sa pinaskill yung faces ng photos ng voters dun sa
No.
precincts in public view?
Yeah, so my view is the law requires it, so you gotta follow the law, right?
Okay.
Mm-mm. So it is a privacy concern, but remember the Omnibus Election Act BP 881 was written way before
The DPA.
the DPA. And this is why we have been calling to amend it already, because right now we have BP 881, which which is the main law. Then we have a bunch of other laws that add automation, overseas voting, local absentee voting, Fair Elections Act, etc. So marami yung iba-ibang laws. So it's a bit complicated because there are things in the old Omnibus Election Code that are no longer applicable. And there are
Mhm.
some na hindi na angkop sa times. Like for example, thumb mark. I really feel that we should do away with the thumb mark. Kasi feeling ko that's also one of the reasons why some ballots get smudged, 'di ba? Kasi some of the posts, you are required to put your thumb mark before they hand over the ballot to you. So yung
Mhm.
nangyayari dyan is meron kang ink in your thumb when you're handling the ballot and you're voting.
Mhm.
And the ink is black, so obviously it will get red if it smudges
Mhm.
on a particular oval. So there are things like that na I think kailangan na natin ma-amend. And COMELEC did say naman na wala naman sa GI na you have to do the thumb mark. But because nakasanayan na ng mga tao that you thumb mark, etc., they do it. Now we've heard that some precincts require it and some precincts don't. But I think it would be nice to just do away with that entirely.
Sa amin, signature lang. Hindi na ako
I
pinatambak.
think
I
that's
just ask
fine,
them
di
to
ba?
sign.
Because nandiyan na yung face mo. Nandiyan naman
Yeah.
yung signature mo sa EDCVL. So why do the thumb mark? Then, of course, yung katwiran ng ibang EB is, may box na pang thumb mark eh. So
Mhm.
so I said, that's simple. Next time, tell COMELEC not to put that box. Para hindi lagyan ng box, di ba? The thumb mark is actually for the election returns. Kasi the EBs have to thumb mark the election returns. But yung ballot, yung parang receiving ballots and the EDCVL, baka hindi na siguro.
May isang
Mhm.
question lang ako. Kasi yung karamihan ng discussion natin about uh, nagdi-digitize na talaga yung elections, right?
Mhm.
And then, yung mga ibang nire-raise, like yung sa difference sa hash, yung mga software na bago, yung mga updating, yung bugs, parang hindi pa siya nagigets talaga ng public. Hindi nga namin
Mhm.
nagigets na, nga pala, iba-iba nga pala yung IT experts, no? So,
Mhm.
is there a need to educate the public on this new kind of elections? And is PPCRV doing that too?
Yes, we do our part. Of course, we do run a series of campaigns specific to how elections were, what we at PPCRV do, like the audit and control mechanisms. We do talk about the source code review. We even have to explain what source code is. Something as basic as that for us is not common knowledge. Like, ano yung source code? Ano yung what's running on the machine and why are they different and why do you need trusted build? But what's a build? So yung mga things like that we do. Now, we don't have that big a reach. Of course, most of the time, our programs are geared towards our volunteers. Right? So yun yung first. Two is we do general voters education, but they're generally focused on values, di ba?
Yeah.
Matapat, di ba? Yung makajos, etc. So that's our latest campaign. It's focused on good Christian values, which also equate to good values as a citizen, but at the same time, values we must seek from our candidates. So, yun yung mga programs na ginagawa namin ngayon. Now, could we do more? Of course, we can do more, but it's really a function of where it matters more. I think the values portion and getting people to vote based on values is important, right? We even feel that it should be taught as early as grade schools for civic mindedness, for example. Now, to teach people about hash codes and what source code and builds are, maybe mas ano na yun mas specialist na kasi yun. Because it opens a can of worms, di ba? Once you start to talk about build, you have to talk about software, you have to talk about how hardware works and why there's binary code and source code. So hahaba kasi siya na it's not something you can do in one go. And unfortunately or fortunately, si PPCRV, we only mobilize really kapag may election na. We're not,
Mhm.
ano naman, I mean, there are parts of PPCRV that are year long, but in general, we only mobilize in earnest kapag malapit na mag-election and during the election. And after that, we demobilize. So we're not really designed for it. Maybe we could do more in that sense. The only thing in PPCRV that is essentially all year round are the election preparation activities kasi election automation requires you to already plan way ahead of time. So that one is all year, the multiple years, and the voters ed. But outside of that, everything is mobilized, the immobilized. So that's an
Gani,
opportunity, yes.
ganito kasi, although I don't know if you can answer this question, para kasing yung mga ibang complaints, ano, parang kagaya ng nabanggit kanina, it appears to have been due to miscommunication or failure of COMELEC to properly explain what happened. But that's
Mhm.
also because the public do not really understand yung
Mhm.
ganitong klaseng elections. Is Hindi ko alam kasi if there is a pattern or if there are some people who are exploiting that lack of knowledge to spread disinformation to discredit the elections.
Could be, and I will not discount that for sure, right? I mean, there will be people who will use this, but even before automated election, people will use reasons to discredit the election. Din naman, di ba? It's just that the technology has evolved, and therefore their ways of discrediting the election has evolved as well. Siguro in the past, you would use, dirty tricks department would use things about, candidate shaming, etc., 'di ba? Exposés or pang false accusations, vote buying, etc., which still exists now by the way. Here, these are just added mechanisms for them. If you notice, in the run up towards an election, there will always be little, targeted jabs at, there's something wrong with the election,
Yeah.
'di ba? To create doubt. Pagdating ng election, if you don't like what you see, then you say, oh, see, told you so, may doubt, di ba? So I think that's really something that I don't have the answer, but it's something we should watch out for sure. And of course, those of us who understand this must, of course, do our part in explaining to people who don't. uh, yung joke namin within the team is that majority of our time is spent really explaining to people. And this can be as simple as our neighbors, right? Homeowners association, trade association, workmates, di ba? But, if we as a community come up together to help each other, I think we can get the job done naman. It's just feeling ko it's just not something easily done centralized because it's such a huge task eh. And explaining the nuances of software development to a non-software developer is also not the easiest thing to do. But if friends and family chip in, there's also a function of trust. That goes a long way. At the end of the day, what the reason why we all do this and the reason why we as PCRV continue to exist is that we believe in strong institutions. Diba? At the end of the day, people come and go, but institutions must be strong and institutions must support us as a people. Okay, we're protecting one particular institution, but other groups are protecting other institutions din naman, right? So in our case, we're protecting the sanctity of the vote in the best way we can. Then we hope, of course, there will be overlaps with others who are more focused on, say, good governance, etc. So yun din yun. May mga
Mm.
groups yan. So we can help each other naman.
Okay, it's been a really interesting hour. Thank you for your time, Dr. William Yu. Any final words for our audience?
Okay, so thank you very, very much to democracy.net.ph for the invitation. I hope I made sense. I try as best as I can to laymanize things, although I don't have to for you guys, but we still have to because of because of some of the audience. At the end of the day, I'd also like to thank our volunteers, of course, and our sponsors who have supported us throughout the years. As we say in PPCRV, the job might be a tall order, but God has provided so far. So that's quite good, and we are very thankful to our sponsors and our volunteers as well. Then, of course, we pray for the candidates that they take their mandates seriously and do a good job. Uh, and of course, towards the next election, we hope we will have continue to have sponsors and volunteers as well. The job ain't done until PPCRV is no longer necessary. Yun yung yun yung belief ko eh. If democracy is so mature that we don't have to exist, that would be great. Right? Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Salamat.
Si Kiko medyo nagpunta sa isang meeting na urgent. So, you can just leave the call para mag-end siya.
Okay. Salamat.
Thanks,
Thanks,
William.
Nas. I actually don't even know how to leave the call.
I think you can just click or just close the browser window. Yun, okay.